The coaching roller coaster continues as we lead into this new episode of the UFL podcast with a backup quarterback and partner on the opposite side with James Larsen. James is on deck with me today. It's UFL podcast episode 101, and it starts right now.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome back, everybody, to the UFL podcast. I am Zach Keilman in, as always, hosting for this one. You may notice, it's been a minute since we've had this buddy on the opposite side. He's on ATU all the time. He's our insider extraordinaire on PFN. But James Larsen sitting in with me today for episode 101 to kick off the second of the century mark episodes of this long-running journey of the UFL podcast. James, look, it's good to have you on. I'm gonna jump in with a few things here and let you get your thoughts real quick off this. Are you chilled out? We were recording this the day after some crazy stuff dropping that we're gonna talk about now. But have you caught up? Have you gotten a chance to breathe, my friend? I mean, that's something I'm asking right now.
Not really. I mean, it's just there's always stuff going on. I mean, yeah, I had a bunch to do yesterday, but now I'm looking like, I got to get a bunch of previews out. I got to get through some things, and I'm traveling a bunch this weekend, so I got to sort out those plans. It's a whirlwind, but I feel like it's kind of interesting that ref decides to not join after a team finally won. It took them
I know
100,000 days to finally get a win, and they did, and he's nowhere to be found. So I don't know if maybe he was the sacrifice that needed to be made in order for Houston to actually finally get a win. Who knows? I'll do some recon on that one, but we'll see what happens with ref. I hope he's okay.
The mental preparation I was having for this episode, so I could hear all of the 10-0 or 10-0 away we go type of stuff. I was ready to counter back aggressively with breaking refs law and how much I gave up in the pick'ems, which I'll discuss later with my pick'ems, because I'm as you remember, my friend Jet Branson had to say that I was okay with giving all these things up, and trust me, Jet influenced me. That's why I shaved the mustache. He convinced me to do that too. So but we won't see him for a long time. Anyhow, though, yeah. Kind of was expecting that, but that's okay. Life happens. It's been a while since you and I have had an episode, though, so glad to have you on once again for this. And honestly, what a more fitting episode to have. And it's kind of been all season with this just discussion on flipping and changing and who's what and where on the sidelines right now. And it's like we don't get a break at the moment. And we're going to jump into all that today. Before we do that, though, the usual live release, of course, before we jump in. If you're listening to this show right now, podcast, or if you're watching us right now, what are you doing? Have you clicked on that subscribe button below? Click on that, click the bell, builds morale, not only for you, but for us too. And you also don't miss this show, but as James will gladly be happy for me to mention, you don't miss ATU as well, Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern time, where him and I and the whole list of characters go on and discuss the entirety of the week that was and any other news going on in the world of the UFL and sometimes spring football extras while we're at it. So, be sure to click that bell. Also, be sure to support us at the channel as well. Royal Retros, you get 10% off your order, by the way, over there. They're basically the spring kings of merch right now. UFL, Arena Football 1, you name it, they got it over there using code USFL podcast, the old one for that one. But you get 10% off your order, supports the channel, and you also get to get some sweet swag from those guys over there. They make some great stuff too, and support our shows on social at UFL Podcast and at Around the UFL on your favorite platform. Just look them up. You'll find it there as needed. All right, James, now we can get into this. Let's fully dive in. I know that I have a rundown here. We can pick and choose what we need, but we had two massive head coaching items drop. I'll start with the one that seems like I'm kind of shocked that we're back to square one on this one, and it's Ken Whisenhunt. It's the thing. I thought we had some clarity with the leave of absence. It was like a willy won't he when we talked about it last time, Brady, that he's coming back, and now it sounds full out. Like, this is it. Like, I sayonara. I have given the salute. I'm in the car. I'm driving down the road. I'm not coming back to Western Tennessee anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely caught some of us by surprise, but you look at the last couple games, I think what concerns me a bit about the situation with Ken Whisenhunt is the fact that you kind of watched his body language on the sidelines and just kind of some of the interactions that he had with other coaches. It felt like he was a little bit unsure of what he was doing at times. He needed, some help. Like there was times where I noticed like Jim Turner, who obviously stepped up as interim head coach, he's doing that again. Jim had to kind of, just kind of, I guess, guide Ken through certain play calls and things like that, which I thought was just a little bit strange. I hope Ken's doing okay. I'm not entirely sure what is all going on with him behind the scenes, but it feels like there's obviously something personal, and he just needs to step away from football for the time being. And it leaves Memphis in a bit of a rough spot once again, where they're 0-3. It was one thing where, you're heading into a season and you had this change happen, and you're like, okay, we might lose the first couple games because of all this chaos, but hopefully we can get our feet back under ourselves and get the train rolling, right? Now, you're 3 weeks into the season, you're 0-3, and you have to go through this process all over again. And it's like, I mean, you got to think that kind of affects the morale a bit of the organization as a whole.
Well, I mean, look, one thing you can at least give that helps as much as it's chaos is thank God Jim Turner got one game under his belt as a head coach and I think, maybe from what we're seeing with the census, maybe that was kind of the writing on the wall is, all right, maybe I need to be ready to step back in again. So that does help a little bit, but it is turmoil over there right now. I would have to admit, it doesn't seem like that's a very, I think, calming coaching environment right now. Luckily, I mean, they did bring in, as we'll talk a little bit more if we on this with Noel Mazzoni coming in and he's already been in, of course, but more of a senior role here with the offensive coordinating duties. But that being said, this might be a little more stability, knowing that you don't have to kind of walk on eggshells perhaps on what Ken Whisenhunt's status is. It's not ideal whatsoever. I mean, we've had a lot of that talk of coaching movement this year, I think way more than some people want. Memphis in particular, though, I mean, that's just it. You wanted a team that was already one of the lower end teams last year, got that first round pick, was looking for stability, seemed like they were going to get it. Ken Whisenhunt was that big grab, not only for the team, but for the league. And now you're all of a sudden, it seems like you're back to square one once again. And not to mention, this is coming off a brutal loss to Houston in your home stadium as well. A very winnable game that was definitely grabbed out of the jaws of victory going into the second half. Not much else going in a positive direction right now.
No, you're absolutely right. And, it's a shame because when Ken Whisenhunt joined this team and as they really, redid this roster with GM Jim Manos, who I think did a pretty solid job this offseason of bringing in new talent. And the whole thing was like, look, the culture of Memphis last year wasn't great. They went 2-8. This was like their redemption tour. They want to get back on track. We saw the coaches they brought in. I mean, the defensive staff is outstanding. You had Ken Whisenhunt up there. You had Jim Turner. You've got guys that are really incredible coaches at their individual levels. And to have Ken, come back and go and come back and go and come back and go, it's not good for the culture. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing is just some dysfunction beyond, not just behind the scenes, but also on the field. I mean, that second half collapse was pretty rough. That's, like you said, that's a game that Memphis easily could have won. I think moving forward, now it begs the question of how do you right the ship? I think they at least are in a bit of a better spot where in week one, you had TJ Vernieri making the play calls and Jim Turner was assisting on that. Now you've got Noel Mazzone, who I think, it's one of those situations where I really like TJ, and I think he's definitely someone who deserves an opportunity to be a play caller. But in this situation where it is very unique, and you have the opportunity to have someone like Noel doing it, look, Mazzone was calling the plays for the New Orleans Breakers back in 2022, and we saw all the success that he had with that team. Even though Kyle Sloter was dealing with injuries the whole season, they had to go to the backup quarterback a couple of times. They still won 6 games, still put up a fight against Birmingham in that playoff game. That was a team that had a lot of success, so I like the addition of Mazzone, and like you said, he was already on the staff, which, again, look, the league's got to be a bit more clear with some of these things, because, the only way we know that Noel was on the team prior was that he was on the flip card a couple of times.
Well, and thank God the league's been posting those flip cards since last year, because those used to be just exclusive to emails. You couldn't. You'd be lucky if you got them. So
Yeah, no,
smart move
it's
by them, because thank God we've noticed that.
exactly.
Otherwise,
But look, I think at least where they're at, like you said, at least Jim already has a game under his belt, and now, funny enough, he gets to go do it against your Panthers again. So we'll see how that goes
yeah.
this time around Friday night. But Noel, he's a help. I don't think he's gonna help them turn things around entirely, but he's at least gonna provide a bit of stability in on the coaching staff and with those quarterbacks. And speaking of stability, that team does not have any stability at quarterback because they're still going back and forth between EJ Perry and Troy Williams. They can't really pick one. Perry arguably lost in the game last week, but they're sticking with him as a starter, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's too bad is getting a lot more bad EJ Perry right now, and you don't need to be seeing that, a little too erratic for the time being, which is fair. We've seen this from him, but maybe they're going to have to experiment a little bit. Obviously, when you start getting into Owen whatever territory, at some point a change will come if you don't have any success. Maybe with going down 2 games to Michigan, in what is more, I guess, weaker conference in the USFL conference. Maybe that will be what forces it. Or if they get a win this week, things will kind of get lopsided. Because again, this is Michigan. They've been playing down to opponents, as you and I both know, all year. Who knows what will happen down in Detroit on Friday night for, they're actually labeling it, by the way, Fox Football Extravaganza this weekend. So, because it's 3 games, just had to point that out. But yeah, look, they at least have Jim Turner stabilizing it. I like Mazzoni coming back, and I honestly, for the sake of, and we have 2 coaches coming from this scene, for the sake of everybody coming away from the IFA and coming back to at least a little more, much more better footing, I'll even argue here. I think that's the wise move, and I miss that he went on and I know he was trying to take a chance over there. They were trying to start a Portland team at one point where he was going to be the head coach, and I know that didn't work out. I'm glad he's here. That's a guy I was like, yeah, I hated that we lost that talent drain to a league that as we all have talked behind the scenes in the PFN Discord, link in the description, by the way, UFL seems like the place to go right there for someone like him. But,
absolutely, and
yeah.
to think of it too, I mean, if the football gods didn't get in the way, he would have been the Pittsburgh Maulers offensive coordinator in 2024, which would have been really fun to see. I mean, that's a team that was trying to turn things around. Obviously, phenomenal defense. Offense wasn't great. I think Noel would have been such a key addition to their staff there and would have changed the team around even more. But now he's in Memphis, and funny enough, he's with some of the same guys. Troy Williams is a quarterback here in Memphis the same way he would have been in Pittsburgh. So,
yeah.
There's definitely, it's funny how these spring football storylines tend to work out, and you look at certain details here, and you're like, whoa, like, this is really cool. Like, it all comes back full circle. So that's kind of like one of those situations here with Noel and Troy and the staff.
You find your way back. So eventually you find your way back, I guess. My final thing with the Whisenhunt thing is, I imagine if I'm a fan right now, if I'm in the yacht club, what is the situation where you have Ken? We talked about Ken with the original. It seemed like a health-related thing. It almost feels like it was better off he just sat out and just moved on. Because I know I'm kind of circling back on this subject, but like while we're talking, I'm just thinking it almost feels like it would have been just better to just cut loose after week 1.
No, I completely agree. Like, I think that where this gets tricky is where you had him come back and you had him coach, and we saw these last couple of weeks where it just, I don't know, it just felt like there was kind of a disconnect between him and the team, and just in general where, like, yeah, you would have been better off, especially since it feels like even though he came back, he still knew probably that he was going to be heading out before the season was over. So it really, I wonder, part of it too, who knows what was going on legally behind the scenes, right? With contracts and things like that,
Valid point.
What can you do? What can't you do? I'm sure that was a process that needed to be sorted out between Ken and Russ Brandon and Daryl Johnson and the rest of those executives. So who knows exactly how it all went down behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, looking at how it's played out so far, you would be better off with Jim Turner just being the head coach the last couple of weeks, in all honesty.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. Structure contract is definitely something I would have been asking at that point. I don't know what, off the cuff, I'm not sure we will know what he was going or grabbing for that. But, for how much they hyped up and wanted him, as we've talked in the past, that had to have been something that was definitely now bringing to light? That had to have been something that had to discuss. Like, how do we exit this without feeling like we're going to lose a large chunk of what we discussed off a very short period of time? Circumstances be damned, of course, being the case. I'm not going to just say it's like, well, I'm out. No, we talked. It's a health thing. Okay. At the beginning. So just something to think about. But I hope I'm with you. I hope Ken's fine. I hope things work out. It sucks it didn't quite go as planned, because I like the name brand recognition is what I loved, but it's a shame that it got to this point. I'll save this discussion point I want to get into after we talk about the other elephant in the room, and I think this one, maybe, James, I'll just let you lead into this. I mean, when you're seeing Wade Phillips in the press box 2 or 3 weeks, like, those are some red flags for us, just being like, wait a minute, what's going on here? That's not something you want to see. Like, head coaches don't sit in the press box. That's not something that happens in any level of football unless there's like a special medical type of thing. Maybe someone messed up their leg or arm or like something like that. Or maybe they have to be up there. And that's kind of what we got. The vibe is a medical type of item, and sure enough, that seems to be the case right now.
Yeah, and for Wade, week 1, he was up in the press box. Week 2, he was back down the sidelines. But this past week, he's dealing with sickness again, and he wasn't even in the press box. He was just in the locker room the entire time. So it's not like he was still at least trying to do something from the press box. He wasn't involved at all. So Peyton Pardee was the interim head coach this past week. A very interesting scenario for him. But, now San Antonio, they've already had changes. AJ Smith left. Peyton Pardee gets promoted from wide receivers coach to offensive coordinator, and now he's interim head coach. It's kind of crazy.
Life comes at you fast,
Like, it's all played out for him so quickly. You think, if AJ Smith was still there, where would he be at in this whole thing? But, from the sounds of it, it seems like Peyton Pardee was kind of the guy that San Antonio was leaning more towards anyway, especially with the direction the organization's been wanting to go in, being more run heavy, kind of focusing more on that style of offense rather than, the spread him and shred him that we saw from AJ Smith the last couple of years. So, it's one of those things where San Antonio had a choice to make, and now Wade Phillips, hopefully he heals up, hopefully he's okay, and hopefully he can return, but there's no timetable for when he might be back. And from the sounds of it, he's just sick right now, so at least it shouldn't be anything that's super, super serious, but, he just needs to step away and try to heal and recover, and Brahmas will have to weather the storm.
Yeah, I mean, this is a prime time for, I think we're talking about younger talent like him to step up and see what he can do. Obviously 0-3 start again, another one of those teams down there that needs to kind of find its rhythm sooner rather than later, and the one that's in the most competitive of the two conferences and already in the hole. But yeah, I mean, the circumstances stink. Wade, of course, is going to have to find a way to recover here. But I kind of think this opens the door to something we've talked about on ATU a lot. And, when do we see that change of the guard? And I don't want to say this is that, but I mean, Wade's in his late 70s at this point. He can't coach forever is the thing. The league, we talk about these opportunities for coaches all the time. And Peyton is one of those guys who's been sitting in the wings. Weird to talk about this discussion a week after AJ leaves, because we've talked about AJ Smith being in the wings for a few years now on different scenarios. Is this the moment? I mean, we're almost half the league moved on, and veteran coaches switching out for guys that we just need to fill in a space right now.
I feel like this is hopefully going to be a wake-up call for the executives in this league, because, I mean, I've been pushing this for such a long time. I know you have talked about it as well, and so many others, where it's like some of these younger coaches, like, they're so hungry for this opportunity, and like they want to help push this UFL product forward. Where, look, like, I love the guys like Ken Whisenhunt and Bob Stoops and Wade Phillips, but these guys are in here because of their big names. It's not like they're doing a ton of stuff. It's not like they're super proactive pushing the league forward. They're just here to coach. It's kind of an easy gig for them to get to come in for a few months. They do their coaching, they do their thing, they do some press conferences, and then they leave. And that's it. And they don't really do much else for the several months that the UFL isn't around, where you have some of these younger guys who are like so hungry to not just make their team better, but they want to make the league better. And they would be out and about. They'll be doing stuff. They'll be engaging with fans. Like, I really do think that the UFL, look, the NFL has benefited so much from some of these younger head coaches. I mean, look at Sean McVay and what he's done in Los Angeles, and look what Kevin O'Connell's been doing in Minnesota. And there's plenty of guys, Mike McDaniel's down in Miami. Like, these guys, they're bringing new innovations to the NFL, and we're seeing how that's really paid off, and how not just that, but some of these younger coaches can really connect with the players, in a different way that some of the older guys that have been around for a while just can't. It's just different scenes. So I'd love to see them give guys like AJ Smith and Jaron Horton, and look, Peyton Pardee a guy that is deserving of a shot, and I think he handled everything pretty damn well this past week given the circumstances, and we'll see if they can they'll have a really tough challenge this weekend against DC, but I'm excited to see how Peyton handles all of that.
Well, and for his sake, I got to give him props, because look, you handled a week before what seemed like, and I know on the surface with the way it's handled, there's public relations set up on how you handle it, and there's obviously what is talked about in the locker rooms or behind the scenes or on social media. And I'll be honest with you, like, to me, he handled what I felt was kind of a volatile split in a way. PR wise, it definitely was amicable, but I would not say that was amicable based on what we had talked online and what we were discussing and what we've seen discussed. So, the fact you handle that, and now you're put in this position, yes, it's life comes at you fast, but I feel like he surprisingly is up to the task right now, which is, I think that speaks to the man in charge and what he's been sitting and waiting for right now. We haven't talked about him as much because AJ Smith has kind of been that, that guy. Again, like, it's kind of surprising we aren't talking about him right now, but Peyton seems like his stocks rose incredibly because it seems like he's held his own really well.
No, I completely agree. Week 3, there's things that they need to clean up, but that was the most complete that we've seen San Antonio look so far this season. They're kind of embracing the new run-heavy offense that Wade Phillips and Peyton really wanted to implement. And look, I'm excited, and I think, to your point, there's so many guys that have already proven themselves in this league, right? We talk about AJ. That's a guy that's had a winning record. He's brought 2 teams to the playoffs with his schemes. He was also a part of the 5-0 Roughnecks back in 2020. Look at guys like Colin Bauer in Michigan who have taken over as a young defensive coordinator. Michigan had one of the top defenses last year. So far, they're shaping up to have one of the best units again this season. Look, we talked about Jaron Horton plenty. That's a guy who doesn't need any introduction. I'm sure all of our listeners are very familiar with what he can do. But as this league looks to grow, I think it was important to have some of the bigger names like Wade Phillips and Bob Stoops, et cetera, to get the league going, to give them some credibility. But those guys are not the future of the league. The younger coaches that are coming up the ranks, those guys are the future of the UFL. And I guess the executives need to start to realize that pushing some of these guys forward a little bit sooner than later will be beneficial to the league. And I think we're seeing that right now with Peyton.
And I think this might be the time to change. That's why I bring it up. This is the perfect episode if we're talking, we can talk chaos of this all the time. It's been 3 of the 4 weeks this season. It's been coaching chaos for the most part and trying to keep up with it. So, that's been like the bread and butter talk of our shows this year on this in particular for this version of the show. And then we've done it on ATU, but I think we can talk, moving forward, the league keeps, and credit, you got to with some face, the league keeps talking next year and talking about what's ahead. Well, okay. Well, those are right now 2, which I would argue going to be 3 by the end of the year. Maybe Wade returns at the end of the year, but I feel like I'm going to put speculations on this might be the sign that he does not come back next year, but that is my thoughts and opinions, not anyone in the league's own. So,
though I had kind of heard rumblings that he wasn't going to make it through this full season regardless, just because he was dealing with a lot of this stuff during camp. He was missing practices. He wasn't around. He wasn't as involved. So this isn't too surprising to me, and I wouldn't be shocked if Peyton is the guy the rest of the way. And if Wade comes back, we definitely won't see him in the same role. He'll just kind of be there to help guide, to help do his thing. But I would see Peyton as still at least being like an assistant to the head coach type of situation where he's the main guy running it, and Wade's just there to, help oversee it. But we'll see how it plays out. It's spring football. You can't really predict how anything's going to go.
You know what name I've been hearing a lot thrown around again, and honestly, I get why, because we've talked about the name a lot, and, someone that people want to see come back is, Mr. Anthony Blevins once again coming up. It's been showing up on a few of our favorite friends and cohorts, discords and tweets as well. And I understand, credit, he's on my Bears in Chicago, special teams assistant and whatnot. But it's not impossible. But this is the time. Like I said, if this is feels like there possibly could be a change at guard type of thing. Maybe the execs get the hint. Hard to say. It's going to come down to how do you want to do this? This is the time to do it. Is next year? Feels like. I don't know.
We'll see.
Seems
as long
like
as there
right
is a
time.
next year, I think now's the time.
Yeah, keyword, of course, with that. Still leaning on that, but we'll be honest with ourselves a little bit too. That's fair. Speaking of which, let's talk about some football while we're at it. So and talk about some transactions with that is what I'm going to go into. Kind of all over the place, and we talked before we got on the show. There's honestly, we can go in as depth as you want about this. I'm game for it, but I will mention some key IR designations and, of course, signings. I'm going to go right into the IR ones right here. After last week, Ty Scott goes on IR after a fantastic week in a crucial, high-energy match against the Battlehawks. Damn shame to say that, because we've been waiting for this guy since last year to finally be used in the right capacity and also take his reign as that number one receiving role. He goes down. I'll shotgun a few more of these just to kind of start the combo here. Rolling Stallions lose Jaron Jones. Credit, they do bring in Harper back, so they do have some depth back, of course, from that loss. And then the other one I had marked down for right off the gate, Taco Charlton comes back. He's now a Renegade instead of a Birmingham Stallion.
Yeah, I guess the big IR one is Ty Scott. I mean, I remember you and I talking about him last year when DC was kind of underutilizing him midway through the season. We were like, what the heck? But then they finally, came around to their senses and really let him take over as wide receiver one, and they did some great things. And that's a huge loss for DC, because this is a team that, I mean, look, they're 3-0, but they're still finding their identity. Their offense has been very inconsistent. We've seen Jordan Tiamu kind of hit or miss from throw to throw, essentially. So to lose a guy like Ty Scott, who you've already had a lot of chemistry with over the last couple seasons, that's tough, because you're working with a lot of newer guys that have only been there through training camp and through these first few weeks. Ty Scott, Chris Rowland are really the two main guys that returned in that wide receiver core. So now you lose Ty, you only have Rowland, who's a returnee from last season, and Bradley Moore at tight end. Everybody else is new and someone that you're still figuring out how they run routes or what they do in certain situations or how they attack corners in this way or that way. So, yeah, Ty Scott's brutal. The big pickup for Arlington is, look, this defensive line's already played really good football. They've got one of the better pass rushes in the UFL. They've been making quarterbacks' lives difficult all year long. And now you add Taco Charlton, like now you've got Chris Odom, Will Clark, Willie Taylor already on that team making a big impact. And now you bring in a guy like Taco who, look, was he a starter for the Stallions last year? No, but he still had like 14 or 15 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. I'm sure you remember the sack very well of E.J. Perry in week 2. And he kind of sealed the deal in that one. So former first-round pick makes his way to Arlington. He's got plenty of potential. And as he gets kind of adjusted and comfortable in the system, you got him on one end and you got Chris Odom on the other end, and those are two vets that are going to get after it, and I'd be scared if I was opposing offensive lines in the UFL.
No, look, I do love the pickup for Arlington, and we'll talk later. I know we talk on ATU about Arlington, and we're still kind of on the fence with them. I'm bullish, and it's moves like that help with me. Can that offense show up like they did week 1 against San Antonio? Got to find out, because that's really what's hanging on the balance for them to really, I think, make that leap if they want to make that case for that number 2 or potentially challenge for the conference in the XFL right now. But doesn't help to add guys like this for what is a revamped defense. I really love the pick, because it not only, even if you don't, like you're talking, even if he doesn't like start off the gate, man, do I love depth in the interior line. And that is a fantastic depth pickup, if minimum. So, he's perfect. He's been perfect fit for this scene of football. I love it if you use him in the way I think they're going to use him, and as a situational pass rusher. That's what I'm assuming Stoops is going to do. And I think, I think a bunch of our Renegades buddies will be freaking ecstatic to see him used in that capacity.
No, I agree. And speaking of edge rushers, I like the pickup for San Antonio. They brought in Nelson Caesar. Mm-hmm. That's a guy, younger player out of Houston, had a really good career as a Cougar. He spent time with the DC Defenders in training camp, was let go. DC's got so much depth that edge rusher. I mean, we've seen them get after the quarterback every single week.
Oh, yeah.
So, it was tough to make that roster. So Nelson's now got a chance with San Antonio, the defense that went from being the best in the league last year statistically to one of the worst, and they need some help. So we'll see if Will Reed and that unit can kind of turn it around. We've got another tough challenge, like we said, DC coming up. But I like the pickup of Nelson Caesar. They've also, the running backs, they added Aiden Robbins, so now they have 4 running backs on the roster. From what Peyton Pardee said yesterday in the media call, it sounds like some of their running backs are still, they're still dealing with some tweaks and they might not be fully available. So that's why, at the moment, we'll see the Brahmas keeping 4 running backs on the roster.
I mean, shoot, if they're going to be leaning even more into that run first, pass second offense and getting away from air raid, you got to have some sort of health there. And obviously that offense runs a lot more. Even more so this year, we see through Anthony McFarland having success on the ground. So any bit of time you can get away from him if you're going to do by committee and healthy committee, mind you. I'm with you there. I'll tell you what though, any pickup like having Caesar picked up, the Brahmas just need something. I know you and I have kind of hinted at this in shows. I'm still beyond baffled how poor this front seven is out there for a Wade Phillips unit in San Antonio. It's mind-boggling how bad it's been through 3 weeks getting blown off the ball. And I know things change on a dime in spring football. You and I have seen this, but it amazes me because that's not the Wade Phillips way. The last 2 seasons, that's how they build their teams, is in the trenches. It doesn't feel right to watch them give up gashes in the run defense like they do.
No, I completely agree, and it's been strange. And look, I think the big thing is sometimes if it works, why blow it up? And we saw the Brahmas, their defensive line, a lot of new pieces, especially at edge rusher. Garrett Nelson's the only edge rusher returning. You didn't have Delonte Scott come back. You didn't have Wyatt Ray come back. You didn't have Tim Ward come back. And those are all 3 guys that were key pieces to that unit a year ago. And now we're seeing some turnover, right? They released Rashad Berry already, and that's a guy that was coming in as one of the bigger prospects for them this offseason. He didn't really do much at all. They already cut him and replaced him with Nelson Caesar. Defensively, the linebackers have stayed relatively consistent where you have Jordan Williams and Devontae Beckett leading the way. But in the secondary, Greedy Williams comes in, he kind of underperforms, and then he gets hurt, and you cut him. You've got guys that are trying to get, adjusted into the system, like Chris Steele, who had a pretty good game against Michigan this past week. He made some plays, had a couple of PBUs. I liked what he was able to do. But again, it's like there was so much chemistry and camaraderie, especially down the stretch of that season. You look at the 2-game stretch against St. Louis where they held that team to, 12 points in back-to-back games or something along those lines. I mean, they were just shutting them down. So it's like, did you really have to go out and change things up so much? I mean, I feel like you could have made a few tweaks, but tried to bring back more pieces. They didn't. And yeah, it's been tough for these guys to get on the same page so far.
I still can't believe it. I know that we have seen that burn teams, of course, in the past. And, it's funny, like I try and stay away, as you and I know. I'm a Panthers fan. I try and talk everyone. But, that was the worry I had about my team this year was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And credit, been playing down to opponents. We've talked about this. Last week, San Antonio, it feels like that was kind of what happened there. And that being said, though, that's the flip side of the coin, where that talent at least has it where last year's system's still working for the most part. It's getting you wins. They just need to put things together to get to that next step if you actually want to be a championship team. Here, it's the opposite side where we've seen it in the past where, how do I put this? I think maybe Arlington last year, the 2024 version of Arlington kind of comes to mind, where it's like, on paper, this team won an XFL championship. It did bring some pieces, but it brought a lot of pieces from the XFL over. Just didn't execute.
Right, and the funny thing is that, at least in Arlington's case last year, they still looked more competent, and they were right there in those games, and they just didn't execute late in games. Whereas it's just been so strange to see this Brahmas team that hasn't been able to execute really at all early on. And at least this week they looked better, but there's still so many things to clean up. They jumped out to a 9-0 lead. they settle for 3 field goals. If you get at least a touchdown there, can get 2 touchdowns, you're looking at, a 17, 18-point deficit for Michigan. I don't know if the Panthers come back in that one, but, because the defense was able to hold up and there's just some like boneheaded plays and mistakes where like that first drive where they settled for a field goal was 4th and 1. They're inside the Panthers 15. You have a false start and it's 4th and 6, and then you settle for a field goal. They were about to go for it, and you convert there, you score a touchdown, and it's a completely different ball game. So those sorts of things that San Antonio needs to clean up, and they were so good at that last year. They were one of the cleanest teams in the league, I felt like, across the board. So we'll see how Peyton Party and this unit can try to put it back together. But yeah, so far it's been incredibly disappointing. I think all of us are still a little bit shell-shocked at how incompetent this team has looked on paper. Well, I mean on the field.
Yeah. Quinn, you know what? I've been wanting to isolate and have a one-on-one with you on this, but I haven't had the right time until now. So I'll start here. Last week, yes, you guys know it's a bit, but the Jet Branson thing I brought up, and it's like, and I listened to you guys talk about this, the competition this year, and waiting to see who is the ultimate team or who is the ones that do legitimately look the best is, I can't wrap my brain around because I'm used to seeing that by now. I'm wondering if, like, how many weeks are we going to wait? I feel like we're going to be like well into the second half of the season, and maybe we still don't even feel confident going into the playoffs this year about any of these teams and what they can even do like for runs. It's strange, because like, even I'll admit, like, yes, DC is the best. I'm going to put that hands down again. I know I come off as a sourpuss when I talk about the defenders in a lot of regard. But, I mean, damn, man, it still doesn't feel like we don't have that definitive world beater in this league right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's been the most frustrating thing, is that it's really tough to, like, try to get power rankings together and try to figure out and make predictions of who's going to do well here, who's going to do well there, because Birmingham, they don't look the same. Arlington, they're 2-1. They have a lot of holes. Yeah. St. Louis, they got exposed this week. Manny Wilkins, when he's under pressure and doesn't have the support of a ground game, makes really bad decisions. That's what we saw a year ago, and we're seeing it again this year. DC, they're 3-0. They're rolling. Jordan Tiamu still yet to complete 50% of his passes. So what's going to happen when they start playing defenses that really start to key in on that? And, DC's also kind of, their defense has been so damn good that, they held Birmingham to 11 points, held Memphis to 12 points, and now they just held St. Louis again to, 15 points? So what's going to happen when one of these offenses can get going against DC? And then Jordan Tiamu is going to actually have to perform. And I don't know. It's just, there's so much confusion across the board. And Michigan's a team that's an anomaly too, because you'd think with Bryce Perkins in there that they should be rolling and driving down the field often, but there's plenty of times where they have mistakes, or Bryce Perkins just makes a bad read, or your head coach decides to play 2 quarterbacks instead of just sticking with one. And, we'll see. It's really odd how through 3 weeks, I still don't have any confidence on who's going to be in the championship game, or even the playoffs for that matter, in some of these teams. Like, I feel like at this point, the USFL conference feels like it's going to be Michigan and Birmingham again, just because Memphis, they're a disaster with just behind the scenes. Houston has shown a bit of promise, but they're not going to get over the hump against some of these better teams. And don't worry, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid.
No, I'm not. That was not what I was hitting up for, although I'm glad you brought that up. But no, I will give credit. I kind of want to see what Nolan Henderson does now that he gets the keys to the car. And this is where I would love to hear the ref on this, and I will get that. It will happen. But I actually am fascinated to see what happens now that he's going to get the keys to the car. Because, like, if you want me to say they look kind of competent, they actually looked a little bit competent with him behind center. I have to put that stamp on that. So now I'm intrigued a little bit.
I completely agree. I've always said that Nolan was the guy that should have started for that team. He brings a different spark and energy, and is he a perfect quarterback? No, but he looks more confident out there than Anthony Brown. I think he's, with his familiarity with the offense, since he was already in it for a season a year ago, I think that helps him out a lot. And I think now we're seeing Houston kind of play into Nolan's strengths, where they want him to get out of the pocket. They want him to run. They want him to scramble. They want him to kind of just make things up on the fly, like he did. That touchdown pass to Emmanuel Butler in the back of the end zone.
Yeah.
That was pretty impressive.
That was
and
gorgeous. Yeah.
couple of the plays that he used his legs to extend those drives and, convert on third downs. Like, that's something that CJ Johnson, he's talking about this week in the media presser. Like, he loves that. Like, he wants to see more of that. And I think we will see more of that. And I think we'll see Eric Price kind of calling plays for Nolan to be utilized in that way.
I love it. It seems like we always have, there's really always one good mobile quarterback that can kind of do it all. Manny Wilkins, I still hope can be that too, by the way. You can't throw 4 picks, and that's something that drives me nuts is like, we watched him, yes, 2 lower quality opponents, one being Houston, but like, I know that there is a good passing competent quarterback in there if you just settle down a little bit, and Nolan, I'm kind of, like I said, that's why I'm kind of intrigued because I'm hoping to see like, maybe we're not going to get an Alex Magoo performance or an Adrian Martinez again, but like, I look for those guys because that makes this league even more fun to see those mobile dudes that just kind of, get out and about and they're able to kind of just sling it because they got nothing to lose and are, they're asked to do it. Again, these lines, there's some decent line performances right now. Birmingham, I'll admit, has been playing some pretty good stuff. DC as well, for the most part, been fantastic with Jordan Teamo. But I love the mobile guys that, even if they got to have a little bit more kind of, I think, almost like urgency to get moving and kind of like create. And I haven't seen that fully yet. Manny Wilkins has been the closest, but Henderson gives me hope. I want to see what he can do now that he's like, you're it. You're the man. Because he gives me that vibe every time when I've watched him get some reps. Now last week, same deal.
No, I'm with you completely. This is why we love spring football, is it gives some of these mobile quarterbacks a bit of a chance to shine. And we see, unless you're Luis Perez, you really can't make it in spring football if you're not mobile. The offensive line play just is not high quality enough. So, yeah, let's see. Look, Manny Wilkins, I like what he brings to the table. I did a full breakdown. If you guys want to go to pfnewsroom.com and kind of
should check, and please, check out that
article. When he's under pressure, his decision making goes from a 10 down to like a 2. Like, it's rough, and we got to see how he bounces back. Last year I thought was interesting is, he had that game against Arlington where he threw 3 interceptions in the second half and they lost that game, and then he didn't get to see the field the rest of the year because AJ McCarron came back. Now, this is, once again, a similar situation where he had a really bad performance, but instead, he's coming back as a starter. Anthony Becht is still confident in him. Let's see what he can do against an Arlington defense that they get after the quarterback too. And, they're going to be bringing heat the same way that DC was. Let's see how he bounces back.
Right. And look, there's, for that sake of that discussion, there's no pressure that I can tell right now. Yes, people do know Max Duggan, but it seems like that would be, 1 week, okay, sure. This week where you have it again, it is a 2-1 opponent. We're now talking about seeding potentially early on, crucial first matchup against the Renegades in your own conference. If you have something happen like that again against what I think is a very, as we've just talked, a really revamped defensive front with Arlington that seems way more competent than even years past. That's where I think the conversation really comes into play. One off week, okay, sure, I can back off. Best team in the league, definitive now, whatever. 2 weeks, well, that'll be the question right there. Close loss, sure, whatever. But if he looks bad in a close loss, or as we talk possibly Unreason again, part 2, where we have to go, okay, you made some erratic plays, then we got to talk about it.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, then we got to talk about it. So, speaking of that, I think it's about time to discuss some picks, my friend. What do you say? What do you say?
I'm so down. I think this is a perfect segue.
Yeah.
We've already discussed some of these teams. Let's get into it.
Why not? I'll tell you right away. Kind of tale of two halves or two sides of the coin, if you want, for our picks last week. I know you did pretty darn well up there. I was a train wreck.
No, I think I was 2-2.
I mean, I'll take it. I was 1-3, so I'm definitely still the train wreck. So I'll take that. I know no one was beating Ducky. That was the thing. Had the 3-1 one week. Make sure everybody knew about it. It's all right. But yeah, looking for a rebound myself. Maybe we're both looking for a rebound. That's okay. So yeah, football extravaganza on Fox this week. Got all 3 games, or got all 3 days of the weekend, Easter weekend, mind you. So, once again, keeping that tradition alive in the spring of playing on the Easter weekend as well. And I think if I'm looking at the slate right now, I think most people are looking at that early Saturday game. If of all we're talking, because again, we just referenced it. It's an it's a first half, early-ish season matchup that could have implications down the line for the more competitive of the 2 conferences, with the Renegades hosting the Battlehawks. So, I mean, is that the one you're looking at? Do you have? I mean, we just talked about Nolan Henderson. Maybe that's a good test against the Stallions defense. See what he's got.
Yeah, I think that St. Louis and Arlington should be the most competitive of the. I mean, they should hopefully will all be competitive, but I think those.
Now, yes, that's another discussion we could talk. But like, still, it's a unique slate because like it's one of those on paper. I'm not expecting much outside of that 12:30 matchup with St. Louis going to Arlington, but
right, because that's the one that feels like where it's a little bit more 50-50, whereas like Michigan seems to have the edge over Memphis. Look, given the circumstances, Michigan's at home. Memphis is once again dealing with their coach leaving. Michigan already beat Memphis once this season. They've been the better team. Michigan's definitely the favorite. Then you've got St. Louis and Arlington, where that could kind of go either way. Which team's going to decide to show up, right? They're both 2-1. They've both had some really good games this year. They've both had some games where they haven't looked good. I mean, Arlington probably deserved to win that game against Birmingham, but look, they got in their own way where they didn't capitalize on scoring opportunities, and then it set them up for that kind of ridiculous call at the end of the game, and it just didn't go their way. St. Louis, rough one against DC, but they were still in that game too. Like, they had chances down the stretch. Manny Wilkins, if he doesn't throw that interception, that's an 18-18 ball game in the fourth quarter. That could go either direction. And not to mention DC's final touchdown, that ball got tipped and was in the air and somehow landed in a DC defender's hands. So like a couple things that just didn't go their way despite all the mistakes from Wilkins. So defensively, I think will be the thing to watch in St. Louis and Arlington. Which defense gets off to a faster start? Which defense can actually get pressure on the quarterback, right? Is Manny Wilkins going to be able to kind of elude Arlington's pass rush and get out there? Or is Luis Perez going to get the ball out of his hands quickly? We've seen Travis Feeney and Peter Tamapenu. They've been playing phenomenal football this year on the edge. And Austin Fayalu up them in the middle. I mean, he's been tremendous as a run stopper. So defense is going to be the key to this one of which one gets off to a faster start. Like you said, Birmingham, Houston, I think it'll be competitive. Birmingham is the favorite. Let's look at that defense. Their defense has been very, very good. Nolan Henderson has, he's had kind of mixed success against Birmingham over the last year. I mean, he played pretty good in that Week 8 game last year. It was 35-28 was the final score. That Houston had a chance, but I think Houston's offensive line, in my personal opinion, it's not strong enough to hold up against the D-line that is the Birmingham Stallions that's been playing lights-out football the last couple weeks. And then finally you have DC and San Antonio, and hopefully it's close, but 3-0, 0-3, DC's at home. How much can you really expect from that one?
That's a tough task. I mean, that's the thing, and luckily, party, this isn't like, again, we talked just how the unique situation last week allowed you to kind of get somewhat used to that sideline, head roll that you're doing now. Tough to go on the road again, though, and have to go to arguably, as much as 11,000 fans in Ford Field was awesome to have on paper, that environment with DC and all Audi Field being as loud as it is with the acoustics, it's not a comfortable place to play and call a game. So that's the thing. And you also have a 3-0 team, going to get the even more rowdier crowd than usual because it's a good DC team. So it just adds on to the entire atmosphere. We'll jump back up to Friday here. Who you got for your pick? Showboats, Panthers. Turner gets back on the sideline as head coach. Mazzoni now calling plays. So now again, different OC. EJ Perry under center though. And now, EJ, I say that, it was weird because I'm saying it was the Panthers. Yeah. A return game for EJ Perry, by the way.
It's a fun storyline. Look, I really think Troy should have been the starter after what we saw out of both these quarterbacks last week. And Michigan, to me, they should be in command in this game, right? We've already talked about it. They're a surging team. Their offense has been putting it together week in, week out. Jaden Sheridan's starting to pop off as a running back that can make plays for them. Their defense, I mean, look, they weren't perfect this past week, but Colin Bauer's unit's been playing well. And despite losing Breland Speaks, they were still getting pressure on Kellen Mond. Look, Kenny Willekes deserves a shout-out. That's a guy that's been playing some phenomenal football.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
winning his pass rushes at a tremendous rate. I can't remember the exact number from PFF, but it's like a ridiculous number. Like, he is far and above the top pass rusher right now when it comes to winning his one-on-ones. So if you got him going up against a Memphis offensive line that's seen some shakeups and hasn't been perfect, and now he's go up against his former quarterback and EJ Perry. I mean, these are some fun storylines. I don't like that EJ is getting another start after how he lost the game for them last week.
Yeah, and understandable. We talked about how it was already kind of fringe 50-50 as it was, and then I don't like pinning all the time players being the sole reason. But look, you're up early in that game by a score. You seem to be humming along against Houston. Two crucial picks that essentially flip the entire script. And Troy Smith has to then come in and help save the day. Kind of feels like that was the perfect time to pull the trigger on that flip. And you're 0-3, by the way.
No, I agree. I think Troy, that's a guy that has had success. It's strange because you've got on one hand EJ Perry, who was formerly a Michigan Panthers quarterback, so maybe he does know the defense and he can kind of pick it apart, but that didn't happen week one. And you've got Troy Williams, who, like we talked about, has looked a little bit more confident over the last couple of weeks when he's been utilized in two. He's beat this Michigan team plenty of times before. He beat them 3 times in 2023 with Pittsburgh, and now he's going to be working with Noel Mazzone at OC, who they were already planning on working together. I don't know. Michigan, to me, they have a lot less dysfunction behind the scenes, and I think that's why, they're at home. They're the better team. I'm picking Michigan.
Yeah, and I got to go with Michigan as well. I'll be honest, though, it's probably going to be a close game just like last time, honestly. It just seems like this is a Panther squad that can't get out of its way, so expect some sort of shenanigans that are going to keep it close. Jaron Horton's defense still is playing pretty reasonable through 3 weeks, too, which is expected. So it's not going to be any cakewalk. I will go with that. But I will expect the Showboats offense to find a way to not be efficient. Michigan, I think, with now having it, the Perkins is in control. There's no funny business or whatever the hell it is with trying to decide or give time. Maybe that changes because it feels like, this year Mike Nolan's playing more of the developmental card, give people time type of thing, which is okay. This is part of the league's mission, I understand. But as a fan, and as fans say, play to win the game, do the Al Davis thing, and Perkins is your guy. So maybe that makes it a little more definitive. That'll be the ultimate test. We said this in week one when we debated on ATU. I thought with Perkins in the whole game, that contest against Memphis is a cakewalk. We'll find out if that's the case this time because they really have no other choice unless they want to start Lombardi right off the bat or go with their newly signed quarterback, which they won't. I personally we know, Alan Bowman. So it's good. This will be it, but I think it'll be a close game because they'll play down to their level. So Michigan with you as well. I'll take it. This one, though, the next one, and again, going down the list, the 12:30 p.m. game, we talked just a bunch about it just a moment ago. Battlehawks, Renegades. It's going to Arlington, so different crowd. Renegades don't have to go in and play against a 30,000-seat home venue or anything. But, seems like there's a little bit more energy this year there than in last year, I think, over in Arlington for these contests. Your quick thoughts. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I know that our pick'em already has been kind of put out there, but I think I want to put and say that Arlington should not be taken for granted. This is a team that can keep up with the big dogs.
I agree. I think St. Louis is a slight favorite, even though they're on the road. I do think that Manny Wilkins will bounce back in a way. I think the ground game will get going again. St. Louis had some things to figure out this week where, you saw Abdul Beecham out with injury, so those are some factors to take in consideration. Hopefully Hakeem Butler can maybe get healthy and get back out on the field. I mean, they've been missing him the last few weeks because of that injury to his hamstring. My biggest issue with Arlington right now is Luis Perez has not looked great under pressure. He's not getting the ball out of his hands as quickly as we're used to. The offense just hasn't really been flowing the last couple weeks. I mean, they've had 2 really rough outings against Houston and then Birmingham. And St. Louis's defense, look at the PFF grades. They're at the top at pretty much every defensive category. Donnie Abraham's had this unit playing at a high level. Their cornerbacks are flying around making plays. They're guys that can all, get to the football. great turnovers. The pass rushers, we already talked about them. This is incredibly close. It should be a down to the wire match, but I think St. Louis takes it.
And I really wanted to take St. Louis here. I was very close, but I kept thinking to myself, part of it was I was spited from last week's change of the guard of going, damn, a false start took a potential win away, where I almost looked like a genius for picking Arlington last week. But, as is football, you got to finish and play through all 4 quarters and the time. I'm not going to fault it on just a false start taking away an interception. That being said, I did see the vision here. Arlington's defense is no joke. And what I did watch with St. Louis playing DC, can Arlington replicate taking away the run game again and then go, all right, Manny, we see you. You are mobile. Can we contain you, and will you make the plays? And I think that's what's going to be the test, and I think that's what's going to be the film that's going to be used and the strategy used against St. Louis until they adjust. If they try to adjust, is all right. What if we just sell out on the run and and trying to fight off the RPO runs, and we just force Manny to be a passer? Which, again, this isn't just me saying this. That was also what was brought up as a strategy by DC players, as let's make Manny a passer. So I'm wondering if that's going to be the case. I'm going to bank that Bob does that, and I'm going to say they get a close win. This will not be a 4-pick interception game for Manny Wilkins, though, but I do think Arlington gets a win here and makes things very interesting for the top 3 in the conference, because I think really if St. Louis gets a win against Arlington, I think we're going to start getting that vibe. Okay, it's a DC St. Louis setup. Arlington maybe will get squirrely and keep up, but I'm betting the Renegades get the win here, and we're going to see some kind of splits and make it more down the wire to the end of the year. But it's going to come down to how much can they slow down the run game and replicate the DC defensive game plan. Because if they can't, well, I think then personally you see St. Louis walk away with the win. But that to me is the game plan. And also something here, and a sidetrack on this, James. I didn't get to talk about this because, again, I'll admit I played a bit last week or this past Monday. But can I find an offense that can adjust their game plan mid-game for once in my life? Because I swear to God, I watch every week, and it feels like unless you switch a quarterback out, I'm watching teams, they want to live and die by what they know best. And last I checked, some of the best teams in any level of football are great at adapting on the fly. And I have not seen that enough from coaches in this league. I want to start watching them actually say, hey, maybe we should get away from things that aren't working. And I've not seen that enough yet. It's kind of been annoying to me in a lot of regard, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
No, I mean, and that's kind of how we see it in spring football sometimes, where these coaches kind of stick to their guns a bit too much.
It's like tunnel vision. I see a lot of tunnel vision with this stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, clearly it's not working, so you got to change. Good coaches change their game plan if the defense has your number. I'm waiting for that.
I'm with you.
St. Louis kind of did that with me last week, but I digress. It just had to get that off my chest. At some point, that was going to is one of these at least, but I digress. Anyway, Splitsville on the first of the Saturday matchups. Saturday's primetime game, though, Stallions Roughnecks. So I think it'll be closer, like we just talked. It's going to be closer, I think, than most people expect by the name recognition. What is the game plan on Houston stealing a win here?
The way Houston wins is if Matt Corral's playing the same way that he did last week, and I don't expect him to. Last week, Birmingham's downfall was that Matt Corral just trying to kind of play his own style of football a little bit too much, where he was just forcing throws, and it felt like he wasn't necessarily playing according to the game plan exactly that Skip Holtz had in mind for them offensively. Just some throws that he made and some decisions that he made. I think we'll see him clean those up this week, and that's why I like Birmingham's odds in this one. But if Corral's getting off to a shaky start and Houston can get pressure, which their defensive line's been getting better week in and week out, it does open the door for Houston to with their opportunistic defensive backs who had 2 interceptions last week and some PBUs and made some plays. That's how they win this game. But I don't see the Stallions being as inept as they were offensively in last week.
And I think that's what my barrier is I can't see a consistently bad product again from a Skip Holtz-led team. honestly, I'm kind of watching Matt Corral this week and putting him on the radar of, is this going to be one of those skip, like switch out mid game type of games where you do see who maybe a Case Cookus jump in, because I think, again, that's one of the beauties we saw at the beginning of the year was you picked up 3 veteran quarterbacks that have all had some relative success either in Birmingham or elsewhere. Magoo being out on IR, of course, you can't expect injury whatsoever. That is what it is. Tough first outing. However, Matt Corral has not been much better. And I think he's, to me, has to have some sort of a short leash with a Houston game like this, where you have a opponent, you want to just get by them and worry about locking down your conference with tougher matchups ahead. I'm kind of wondering, maybe we do see Case Cookus somehow, some way make it onto the field on Saturday night.
I would not be shocked. And I mean, if he does, it'd be interesting because Cookus, the last time he played the Renegades, the last time he was on the field against the Roughnecks, it wasn't an entirely pretty scene for him either in that Week 1 game. So we'll see. But I wouldn't be, look, Case Cookus, he's had his ups and downs, but he is a championship caliber quarterback. We've seen it before. So if Birmingham has to go that way, Skip Holtz, he'll figure it out.
Here's my other thing. Will we see, last week Marcus Sims didn't really get, wasn't even touching the field. So, I mean, that's another one I'm looking at. We got Henderson. How much I want to see Sims hitting the field is something I'm watching for too. When that happens, they picked up a guy. You want an explosive weapon. You got the quarterback that I think they feel now gives you the best chances to have an offense that can find a way to generate at a level that is explosive or at least efficient enough. Feels like you have those pieces. Now can you put Marcus in there with a chance of letting, say, Justin Hall breathe and EJ Butler breathe and company like that? And I want to watch what that offense looks like with him on the field. I imagine he hits the field this week. Last week I understood. This week, though, I would think, injury being, we can finally see him get some reps with a Roughnecks jersey on.
Hopefully. I mean, that would be the plan. And the Roughnecks will have Kirk Merritt back this week as well, which will help them out in their run game. I thought their running back did pretty well this last week. Lorenzo Lingard and Saquonte Wright, they ran hard. So you have those guys out there, and you got bringing back Kirk Merritt, and I think this offense is definitely capable. Just can their offensive line produce against such a tough and stout D-line that Birmingham has?
Any bit hold up, please. For the sake, I'll throw the ref a bone here. For the sake of him, can you get a little bit extra to hold up? That'd be nice. I'm going Stallions, though. I believe you were also going Birmingham, from what I can tell. Close game, though. So, a close game on Saturday night. Good primetime matchup, I think. Finally, San Antonio heading to DC. Similar question as what we just talked, but I mean, I feel like this one's really going to be, how much are you energized with Peyton Party's kind of, I would say, stepping in, and kind of what did you get from last week's, I would say, close game? It felt like, again, they seem to have found some sort of rhythm. Defense seemed to have been at least a little bit better than recent weeks. Can you find some sort of offense and way to stifle this DC defender's D? Which that's the thing I'm worried about, is I don't know if they can find a way to slow down that pass rush. I mean, it is despicably good out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be tough, and the offensive line has had some good moments, some bad moments. They lost starting center Alex Millette, they lost starting right guard Colaveo to the Jets, so those are some big holes to fill. I think the run game, you just feed Anthony McFarland the ball, let him wear down the defense, get him in open space, and then it allows for guys like Jashawn Corbin and John Lovett to kind of fill in and batter a defense. And Lovett's had success against, and McFarland both have had success against DC's defense last year, so I think it's an opportunity for these guys to get their feet wet again. The problem is, can you actually get consistent throwing from Kellen Mond, right? He's been so hit or miss, and, if he's under duress, like we've seen some of these quarterbacks have been with DC's pass rush, it's trouble. I think DC's the clear favorite in this one, right? It's just too much going on behind the scenes for the Brahmas. If we see an upset, it'd be great. I think it'd be a cool storyline for the league, but it's just, look, let's be honest. The odds are heavily in DC's favor.
Yeah. God, it has hurt me this year watching John Trey Kirkland and Louise Mack getting so underutilized the way they are. And part of it's just the inefficiency. I know they changed it up, but like, doesn't feel right. These are star guys that I just feel like have not been able to really let loose like they should. Hopefully I see a little bit of that spark again, because it like week one, that really was telling to me when I like Kirkland especially. It looked like he was almost defeated in a way with how that offense was operating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I don't know. I think the problem is that you really tried to take. You had such a good system with what AJ Smith was doing, and now you're completely changing it up with a lot of the same pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where these guys have to adjust. John Trey Kirkland, Marcus Stevenson, who's not really utilized anymore. Justin Smith's not utilized much. Jacob Harris has been a bright spot for them offensively. But
Yes, he has.
I'm not putting my cards in quite yet on this offense. I still got to see more out of them. And going up against a DC team where, look, like you said, the pass rush is great. Let's talk about their DBs. They've been flying around. Bryce Thompson, the former Brahma, has been incredible. DeAndre Thomas, the former Roughnecks that they traded for, has been great. DeAndre Baker looking like on all UFL prospect again. And they were flying around everywhere against Manny Wilkins in that passing attack of St. Louis last week. So I don't know. It's hard for me to look at all those odds in this game and be like, San Antonio, yeah, they're right in it. Like, no, they're not.
No, but I've been a sourpuss on DC all 3 weeks. This is the most sure I've been on them this year. Is definitely feels like they're going to be, set up to walk away and be 4-0. So I'll lock that one in. If I had to pick a lock of the week, it would be this one. But you never know. The later we get into the year, the more exciting things get. It feels like, where we have more opportunities for kind of upsets or these crazy games. Maybe an earliest year kind of fun one to end the week, but I don't know. Feels like Easter Sunday might be a bit of a slumber, if you know what I mean.
Go to bed early.
Yeah. Maybe, well, not yet. Watch a little bit. The ratings gods will thank you. That's all I can put in. Have a little fun with that. Oh man. Speaking of which, here, James, you doing anything for Easter? What are your Easter plans, man?
My Easter plans are to travel out to DC and catch this game. So we'll see how it all plays out.
I did kind of fall into that trap. You mentioned that earlier, but that's okay. It's okay. Mine are to explore the wonders of the desert.
Hey, Zach, that sounds like a good plan.
Yes,
it might end up being more enjoyable than watching this game. We'll see.
I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll. This will be the second weekend in a row I fall asleep at a rest stop. You ain't living until you do a road trip where you got to pass out for 2 hours and wonder where the hell you are. Good times. Good times. Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. James, I appreciate you for playing backup quarterback on this one.
Of course.
Of course, I got to end this with asking what's coming down the pipeline on any of your more editorial forms of writing. You've been doing I mean, you crank out so much stuff as always, but I mean, I've been fascinated with more of the story driven and like more deeper stuff you've been doing as of late this year. That I've seen that even more so than I've seen in recent years from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's PF Newsroom, man. We're just trying to get out as much high quality content as possible, and I really enjoy doing some of those more in depth editorials. I think it's it's stuff that the league needs, and there's so many fun storylines and so many things that we would just want to track and stay on top of. So it's been fun to dive in. Like the Alan Bowman piece that I just put out. Was really unique situation behind the scenes for what the UFL is providing him with, and the fact that he's still going to be heading to the NFL draft after he gets released next week. So. It's just cool. Things like that make spring football so unique, and I just love telling those stories.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. I mean, we've talked in the past. You don't see many of those. Honestly, trying to think off the top of my head, Kenny Robinson's the only one that comes to mind right away. It's like a guy that we're talking draft and play in the same season. So kind of cool stuff. At least he gets a stopgap. Maybe get some tape on and connections on film if needed if he comes back. But definitely check that out. pfnewsroom.com for all the latest. And again, any of James's great write-ups. Again, we talk a lot about you being, of course, what we consider the best in breaking the news and being that Adam Schefter of this spot. But, you do a lot of great writing. So got to reiterate that to people. If anything, go to the site, check out stuff he's putting down that are these in depth and any updates he puts, because it's amazing how much this guy's work ethic is. I can't stress that enough when I get a chance. So keep up as always, man. I'm impressed with you, the individual.
Zach, I appreciate the kind words as always. Right back at you.
All right, folks. Follow us as usual at UFL Podcast or at Around the UFL. Around the UFL, Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. You can catch me and the big man here on the opposite side of me for our panel discussion for the week that was in the UFL and whatever exciting interviews we have in store that might be brewing behind the scenes. Got to save that for you guys later on this weekend. Also, by the way, again, check us out and subscribe if you like the show. Hey, look, you ain't seen nothing yet. We got tons more coming the way. Click the subscribe button, click the bell, builds them around only for you, but for us too. And, hit that subscribe button on your audio platform as well. We do have plenty of course, the podcasting audience too. Appreciate you that listen in, but be free to check out the video podcast as well if you want to see reactions and things that maybe we reference, but you don't get to see unless you get that little visual help, if you will, with these shows. Until next time, he's James Larsen. I'm Zach Keilman. We'll catch you for episode 102 and for week 5 this week and ATU this Monday. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.